Welcome to my channel, The Binge Eating Therapist. I'm Sarah, former binge eater turned psychotherapist, and my mission is to use this space to bring content to you to help you understand your struggle with food and break free from binge eating. And this week I put a shout out on Instagram if anybody had any ideas for videos they wanted me to do, and this subject came up quite a few times: weight gain. I'm recording this video in 2020. This is the year that Corona started and we've had the lockdown, and a lot of people are reporting that they've gained weight, even people who do not struggle with binge eating or disordered eating. And there's a lot of noise out there in the media and in politics where we're all being told that we need to lose the weight that some of us might have gained in lockdown. Now, what does this mean for someone who struggles with binge eating? Well, the problem is, for most people who struggle with binge eating, when they focus on weight loss, the binge eating gets worse and it has the opposite effect. So it means we're caught in a bit of a bind here, where we're being told we should be losing weight, but for many of us, when we try, it makes it worse, and then people end up gaining even more weight. So we need to take a step back and breathe. Okay, so first of all, I want to address the panic, because for a lot of people, gaining weight brings a sense of panic. And there's a big part of me that wants to say, don't panic. But I know that saying don't panic is like saying to somebody who's depressed, cheer up. You know, of course things would be better if I'm not panicking. Of course things would be better if I was more cheerful, but that's not how I'm feeling. The problem with panic is it makes us really focused on outcome and changing the problem or fixing the problem. So panic is your fight or flight response. So if you were being attacked, you would need to make yourself safe as quickly as possible. You wouldn't really be stopping and considering how to do that. You would just act instinctively. So when there's panic about weight gain, the instinctive reaction is, I must lose weight. And straight away, before you've even cut back on food, like you're planning, and your brain is going into this restrictive place where it's planning how little you're going to eat because it needs to rectify this problem and fast. And the thing is, with binge eating, is you don't need to restrict to binge in response to restriction. Just thoughts of restriction can trigger off that response. I've used this example before, that idea that you could have a big presentation tomorrow and you think about it today and your body reacts. You feel anxious, you've sweaty palms and your heart races. It can be the same with restriction. Just anticipating restriction can set off a cascade of increased ghrelin, like these hormonal bodily changes as your body is preparing for less food and is going to start making you think about food even more. So this is why panic is derailing. Okay, so it's like, how do we calm ourselves down? There's that idea, it always sounds overly simplistic, but there's that idea that if you don't like something, change it, and if you can't change it, accept it. Now, the difficulty is sometimes accepting that you can't change it. And maybe you can change it, but what's the cost? And is the cost worth it? So then we come back to acceptance. How do we find peace? So if your body is bigger than you want it to be, or recently it's changed and it's got bigger, for many people that's going to feel uncomfortable, let alone for somebody who struggled with binge eating. So I think to some degree it's okay not to feel okay about it. Because if you start thinking, well, I should accept myself and I should make peace with it, that can then create a whole cascade of judgment and guilt and all sorts of other things where you just become really hard on yourself for just being human and finding this a really difficult experience. So how do we accept a changing body? Well, your body is the size that it is today. That's a fact. And your body isn't going to change size in one day. Not by very much. Not by any notable amount. So I think that when it comes to body acceptance, that idea of we're just accepting now because now is true. Often it gets mistaken with, well, if I accept my body now, that means nothing will change. And actually, I always say, if you accept it, you change. The people who tend or seem to be able to cut back on their food intake and lose weight just don't have the same emotional response to food. It's quite often those people are not, what they eat or don't eat isn't as tied in with their self-worth as it has been for somebody who has struggled with binge eating or any kind of eating disorder, right? So there's something about recognizing that this is not, weight gain doesn't mean anything about your self-worth. And then, so a lot of people will be thinking, okay, well, I've gained weight and I don't want to go out in social situations because people are going to notice I'm gained weight and they're going to think I'm, insert whatever it is you tell yourself. But whatever it is that you imagine other people are thinking, so just kind of take a moment to be like, what is it I imagine other people are thinking about my weight gain? And then ask yourself, is that what you're thinking? I bet the answer is yes. So it's not what they're thinking at all. Whatever it is that we imagine other people are thinking, we imagine that because that's what we're thinking, right? So if you went out and felt like you looked amazing, you would not be thinking that everyone else thought you looked terrible because you thought you looked amazing. You'd imagine other people would think the same. And so we fall into this trap of just assuming that other people are thinking in a more similar way to us, and they're just not. So yeah, people might notice your weight gain. They might have a thought about it. But I bet if you're in that social situation and you're hyper conscious of it, you are expecting them to be thinking of it non-stop because you're thinking of it non-stop. And they won't be. After they've had their initial, I don't know, we would notice if someone's body's changed, just like you'd notice if someone dyed their hair a different colour. You don't know. We do not know what's going on in other people's minds. And I think a lot of the time it might be kinder than we imagine, particularly if what's going on in our mind isn't very kind. So to accept a bigger body is really just accepting this moment. You may not accept your body tomorrow, but like how we feel about anything is now, right? We experience our feelings now because we're having our feelings now. And so often we have feelings because of what we're anticipating, right? So I'm not saying that this is going to be easy. There's nothing that I can say to you that's going to make you feel, I can't make you feel anything about your body, but there's something about how do you want to think about this, even if you didn't think it was possible to think like that. How do you want to think about it? Because how we think about a situation creates our experience of it. I mean, if you remember back to the first time you ever thought you were fat, and you look back at that now, for most people, and not everyone, for most people, that was when they are smaller than they are now. And they could look at that then and say, well, I wish if I could get back to that, I would never think I was fat at that weight now, right? But it just kind of shows like how we think about it. You were just as miserable then when you thought you were fat, but how we think about it is what is going to create our emotional experience of it. So if we intend to like accept it and to find some kind of peace with it, there are times when we're not going to feel peaceful about it and times when we might be able to feel more peaceful about it. So it's like, what would you prefer to think about this situation? By situation, I mean weight gain, that would bring you more peace. And spend some time, you know, if you're willing, like spend some time with these new thoughts because they're not going to chase the old ones away very easily. So like that idea of sitting and writing and journaling and doing all these things that will help you to develop a new way of thinking. You think you need to change your body and then you'll feel better about it. And I'm suggesting you can feel better about it now, that is an available option to you now based on how you choose to think about it. And then to touch on quickly, when we think about like weight gain, if you're someone whose weight is continuing to rise and that's frightening, then we need to just strip back to a moment and just kind of say like, what's going on? Why is your weight increasing? Okay? It might be that it's a reaction to restriction and it needs to increase to feel more comfortable. Or it might not be that at all. It might be there's something else going on. And for a lot of people, that's going to be emotional somewhere. And again, like weight loss is not going to fix that without looking at the why. Like, why is your food intake where it's at. You know, it may be this is what your body needs, or it may be there's something else going on. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's one or the other because I don't know, I'm not you. So it takes, I suppose, that willingness to sit with yourself and wonder about this stuff. Because if for you food is about managing emotions, unless there's something around trying to manage and experience your emotions without food, then it's always going to kind of catch you up. It's always going to catch you out. So for some people there is, I say work to be done. I don't really like the word work because it really does sound like enormous effort. And it does take effort, but it can also be like a really enjoyable journey. It doesn't mean it has to be a slog. It can be quite exciting when you realise that you can actually sit with feelings without eating on them. That can open up a whole new world of possibilities. Rather than this idea that, oh my goodness, I have to do this, it's going to feel terrible. So when it comes to weight gain, I hear your panic, and we need to find a way to reduce that panic, because as long as that panic is still there, chances are that's going to increase binge eating in one way or another, because it will either drive you into wanting to restrict and that will trigger it, or the feelings of panic will be so overwhelming, food will be an emotional tool to cope with the weight gain, which then compounds the problem. So breathe, you're okay, all right, you got this. See you in the next video.